the synodal path will bring reforms in the Church that are more than a mere change of the language rules, as one hears it everywhere from the PR-adept current Pope. The meeting was, as the Church openly admits, initiated as a consequence of the now more and more visible cases of abuse, that is, because of the clerical crimes committed by child molesters. There are now demands on the Church syndics to abolish celibacy, to rethink the Church's sexual morals, the necessity of which should actually be obvious with the hundreds of thousands of victims of sexual crimes committed by the clergy and the position of women in the Church. These topics are fiercely disputed between individual clerical groups. One might think that such events could actually change something in the dogmatically cemented structure of the Church. Due to the Pope's repeated and skillfully spread announcements, perhaps some of the participants actually believe in good faith that they could successfully shake up the centuries-old, misogynistic and dogmatically rigid attitude of the men's circle in the Vatican. No one will deny that the Church of Rome, traditionally and dogmatically defined, is misogynistic. And actually, there is nothing to be said against a group or an association giving itself a statute in which women have nothing to say, as long as it does not harm others, especially if no one is forced to be a member of such an association. In England, for example, no one finds anything wrong with the fact that there are many such men's clubs with statutes under which women are at best tolerated to carry out subordinate service activities. Women are men who respect women and human dignity, then organize themselves in their own way in another club. This is also how, for example, women could deal with the Catholic Church. Then the men could continue to cultivate misogynistic circles, and the women go to where the Constitution and human rights have a different status. In a free and democratic constitutional state, there should actually be no obstacles to this. And according to the Constitution, the state is, in any case, responsible for punishing crimes, including clerical crimes committed by child molesters. The state would only have to fulfill its task, and then the problem of clerical sexual morals and their criminals would also be quickly solved. Perhaps some people believe that this relatively simple and obvious solution to the problems that are now repeatedly preoccupying the Catholic Church and the media must fail, because then women and other citizens loyal to the Constitution and of ethical and moral integrity will be denied access to the God of the churches. For as well known, the Vatican Church, just like all its clerical competitors, by the way, claims the sole right of representation and the sole possible access to its God. Viewed rationally, it is admittedly difficult to understand why anyone wants to be a member of a secular religious association of a God whose religious association shows such excesses. And why is someone drawn to a God of whom his representatives have been painting a picture of a terrible and wrathful monster and their infallible statutes for more than 1,500 years, an arbitrary and vengeful God who curses his own children and sends them to hell and eternal damnation? One would not even wish for such a father as a worldly father. Those who aren't bothered by all that and nevertheless want to get involved in such an organization, if they are not satisfied with the statutes of their own religious association, should first ask themselves, according to the statutes of this association, who is actually responsible for changing its statutes? In the case of the Church of Rome, these statutes consist of a multitude of regulations, often connected with dress,
sarcastic threats of punishment right up to eternal punishments in hell. They are laid down in writing in large numbers as, for example, the institutional discrimination of women, or celibacy, which, according to Canon 277, paragraph 1 of the Codex Juris Canonici, has been binding throughout the Church since the middle of the 12th century at the latest, after the third and second marriages of priests had already been prohibited earlier. Even then, according to the belief in the Roman Church, the popes were the representatives of the Christ of God in this world. The statutes issued under these popes are supposed to correspond to the will of God and to what the churchmen understand by the term gospel. If celibacy at that time corresponded to the will of the Church God, then who can change his statutes against his will? Surely not any church assemblies, but only the Church God himself. And according to its concept of itself and the statutes of the Vatican Church, who would have to know best whether the God of the Church wants to change his statutes today, for instance, with regard to celibacy? Surely his representative, who is even a Holy Father. So, after all, one has to interrogate the representative for the opinion of his God if one wants to change something in regard to celibacy. However, that leads to a dilemma, because it is well known that at this time there are two Holy Fathers. Nor is it a secret that, especially regarding celibacy, the younger of the two Holy Fathers speaks differently than the older one of the two, who clearly professes to celibacy. How is this possible? Does the one Holy Father ultimately represent another God as the other Holy Father? But what happens if both ecclesiastical Holy Fathers or both gods of religion agree and both announce the abolition of celibacy as the will of the God of their gospel? This would then mean that the God of the religion orients himself to the spirit of the times, or even according to the will of his high priest. Just as the older Holy Father Joseph Ratzinger expressed in 2009 during his active period in a writing on the patron saint of priests, the Curé of Ars, Jean-Marie Vianney, whose words he quoted: "After God, the priest is everything." The superior position of the priest in the Vatican Church is illustrated by the older Pope with another quote from the Curé of Ars in the following: "Oh, how great is the priest! If he realized what he is, he would die. God obeys him. He utters a few words, and the Lord descends from heaven at his voice to be contained within a small host." Whether at the behest of the priest or the high priest, whoever expects that something can change in the faith of the Vatican Church as defined by canon law and dogma must logically also believe that the God of the Church will change at whosoever's instigation. But then the Church God can, in no case, be the true, the eternal, all-one God of neighborly love, of whom all prophets of God, and above all Jesus of Nazareth, taught. Until today, even in the Bibles of the priests of the Vatican Church and its split-offs, the following words have been passed down about this God of love and of love of neighbor, whose eternal kingdom is to be found within, in each ensouled human being. I, the Lord, do not change. According to the dogma of the Church of Rome, these words are the true word of God. This fact may lead to a great disappointment for some people when they have to realize that until now they have addressed their prayers to the changing God of a corporation called Church,
to a God who cannot be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of all true prophets of God from Abraham until Gabriela today, the God whose Son, the Christ of God, is the Redeemer of all souls and ensouled human beings. And perhaps it is also painful to see all the money that the state takes out of one's pocket every month on behalf of this corporation from hard-earned wages as the so-called church tax, and as many have not yet noticed, another at least 20 billion euros a year, which the state lets flow to the churches in various ways from the tax revenues that come from all honest taxpayers. For someone who calls himself a Christian, however, the surprise about this realization should be kept limited. For in the Bibles of the religious syndicates, anyone can himself read what Jesus, the Christ, after whom every Christian calls himself Christian, said to the priests and holy fathers, whom he had never instituted, just as little as churches or any other religions. The words are about vipers and breed of adders, about the sons of the Father from below, and that he was a liar and murderer from the beginning. It may be that some people still find it important to get along with or even have a say in a priestly corporation, because such things seem to pay off in hard cash. After all, many owe their power, their wealth, and their prosperity to the favor of the religious corporations and their networks, which in many places dominate state and society, often in keeping with the corporate headquarters, also under the fraudulent label Christian.
However, one thing should make sense to everyone. Whoever wants to find his place in such a corporation has to subject himself to the rules of this corporation and accept them. And if these allegedly stem from the God of this corporation, then he must subject himself to the God of this corporation as well. He is traditionally anti-women, anti-family, and hierarchically oriented, and seems to take no offense at the sexual perversions of his priestly personnel, especially since the pontifical secret has become so porous and permeable in relation to these crimes. Otherwise, this God would have eliminated the crimes long since, already in the last millennium. When we weigh all these facts, each one can answer the question himself, whether events such as the synodal path can be more than a PR event of the church corporation to reassure the credulous church sheep or dissatisfied tribute payers. Dear viewers, dear listeners, in this report, there was no talk of the salvation of souls. This is not by chance, because religion is not responsible for this. Religions have nothing to do with God, the Eternal, His Son, the Christ of God, and with the immortal soul of all ensouled human beings. The one who calls himself Christian, the one who seeks the true God, the eternal God, should simply follow the words of Jesus the Christ, who already 2,000 years ago spoke and speaks again today, "Follow me." Him, the Son of God, the co-regent of the heavens, the Redeemer of all souls and ensouled human beings. But this in all freedom, without coercion, without churches, without religions, without priests and pastors, and without theologians. Above all, without the enforced monthly tribute to a billions-rich religious corporation from the cradle to the grave. In this spirit, we take our leave of you for today with a wish: remain or become free.
Auf Wiedersehen, bis zum nächsten Mal. Gott zum Gruß.
Zuschauer, liebe Zuschauerinnen.
Dear viewers, dear listeners, we cordially welcome you to this program. Loyalty to the Pope is part of the Catholic's DNA, announced Cardinal Schönborn of Vienna in June of 2018 in St. Stephen's Cathedral on the occasion of a Thanksgiving service for the incumbent Pope. And he called on Catholics to clearly profess their loyalty to Pope Francis. Until now, church officials have merely announced that the Catholic baptismal ritual would leave traces in the human genome. But now, faithfulness to the Pope is supposedly found in Catholic genetic material. Wouldn't Catholics then be identifiable on the basis of a DNA test? The answer to this question is certainly best left in the hands of physicians. Loyalty to the Pope urged by the Cardinal is, however, nothing new. According to the dogmatic guidelines of the Vatican Church, it is mandatory for all people anyway, thus not only for Catholics, for the dogma proclaimed in 1302 by Pope Boniface VIII, to be read under margin note 342 of Neuner and Rose, states, "It is absolutely necessary for the salvation of all men that they submit to the Roman Pontiff." This dogma is still valid today, and no Pope has ever touched it. But in his sermon, the Viennese cardinal not only urged loyalty to the Pope, but also admitted with regard to the 2,000 years of church history that popes would also make mistakes, that they would have had moral weaknesses or have been politically wrong. From the Cardinal's point of view, however, faithfulness to the message of Jesus Christ also requires a clear profession of faith to the respective Pope. What Cardinal Schönborn calls mistakes, moral weaknesses, and political errors was described by the renowned German news magazine Der Spiegel in May 2018 in its cover story, The Ghosts of the Vatican. There you can read about the Vatican. A spiritual dictatorship emerged, powerful, unscrupulous, successful, a ruling apparatus that has functioned for centuries and which even today still functions according to ancient rules. And furthermore, it says, this apparatus has little in common with the core of Christian doctrine. Rather, it is a terribly human organization, headquarters of an elusive world power, closed and secretive. The Vatican has committed sins and crimes. It has brought death to hundreds of thousands of people. It has destroyed other churches, instigated wars, and subjugated nations. And in earlier years, Der Spiegel had already reported informatively about the Pope. In 1989, for example, in an article entitled Popes, Blood and Corpses, in this article, Der Spiegel reports about the book by the theologian Peter de Rosa, who studied at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome and resigned from his priesthood in 1970. His book is entitled Vicars of Christ, The Dark Side of the Papacy. In Spiegel's article it says, the papacy increasingly understood freedom to mean, above all, shaking off the most important rules of conduct of Jesus. Many popes, so de Rosa's balance, were hardly Christians. Several were murderers, brutal warlords. At least one of them was a devil worshipper. The majority possessed by power and possessions. If Cardinal Schönborn now demands a clear profession to the respective pope, would the people then also have had to profess themselves to those popes who in the magazine Spiegel are called murderers, brutal warlords, devil worshippers, and possessed by power and possessions? Perhaps regarding the following popes who are described in the article mentioned, I may quote some examples from the Spiegel magazine.
In the year 1073, Pope Gregory VII made of himself the first pope to ever depose an emperor. 75 bloody battles go back just to Gregory's feud with Emperor Henry IV. Innocent VIII not only announced in the 13th century that no one could judge the Pope, but also incited Inquisition commandos on so-called heretics. He had tens of thousands of Albigensians slaughtered. At the beginning of the 14th century, a contemporary told of Pope John XXII, the blood he shed would have colored Lake Constance red, and the bodies of the fallen would have bridged it from shore to shore. Also, those dead which 150 years later Sixtus IV produced through burning heretics and wars fomented by him are innumerable. A chronicler, he waded mitre deep into crime and bloodshed. The persecution of heretics was joined in the 15th century by the persecution of witches. Estimated numbers of women murdered on papal orders between 300,000 and 3 million. Other sources talk about 50,000 victims. The historian Karl-Heinz Deschner very precisely put the bloody history of the popes in a nutshell. He wrote, "After intensely studying the history of Christianity, I know of no organization in antiquity, in the Middle Ages, and during the present times, including and especially the 20th century, that at the same time is so long, so continuously and so terribly burdened with crime as is the Christian Church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church." Dear viewers, dear listeners, in view of this violent and cruel history of the popes and the Vatican, Cardinal Schönborn speaks succinctly of the fact that popes would also make mistakes, that they have had moral weaknesses or have made political errors. Does this choice of words by the Cardinal merely approximate what actually characterizes the 2,000-year-old church history? And how can one demand loyalty to the Pope with knowledge of a past with so many crimes? Cardinal Schönborn claims that faithfulness to the message of Jesus Christ also requires a clear profession of faith to the respective Pope. Doesn't the bloody history of the popes alone already prove him a liar here? Faithfulness to the message of Jesus of Nazareth is characterized by the love for God and neighbor that is lived, a love for all forms of creation, for our fellow human beings, and also for nature and the animal world. Faithfulness to the message of Jesus of Nazareth includes equality, according to which there are no superiors, but all human beings are brothers and sisters. Faithfulness to the message of Jesus of Nazareth is carried by freedom, which does not force anyone under the threat of eternal damnation to believe or to submit to the Pope. Dear viewers, dear listeners, faithfulness to the message of Jesus of Nazareth means not to follow any human being, but solely Him, Christ, because He said, "Follow me." And to follow Him means to strive for a life according to the 10 Commandments of God and the Sermon on the Mount of Jesus of Nazareth. Faithfulness to the message of Jesus of Nazareth also means faithfulness to His words. "You shall call no one on earth Father, for only one is your Father, who is in heaven." Thus, Jesus of Nazareth did not appoint any holy fathers. He did not call any representative on earth, for He Himself is represented in each person, God in us. With these thoughts, we want to take our leave of you for today. Until next time,
Greetings in God, and goodbye.